Hi, and welcome to the Dark Matters Network. I'm Carly Spell, and I'm delighted to welcome none other than the awe-inducing Professor Dolores Cahill, plus our very own super diligent, super dedicated Toshi, defender of the Bitcoin BSV faith. Now, if you haven't seen our previous episode where Toshi and I discussed the ins and outs of basic economics, commodities, securities, fake fiat currency, Bitcoin, shitcoin, and the rest, pause this, go watch that, and come back to us because this conversation may not make too much sense to you otherwise. Unless you are a sword wielding CDBC destroying privateer of the high seas, BSB buccaneer. So I genuinely purposefully haven't given Dolores a huge intro because if you don't know who she is by now, you really haven't been paying any attention these last 4 years whatsoever. And her CV is so vast, I would need a separate laptop with an extensive memory bank just to type it up. So Dolores, thank you so much for taking the time out of your super busy schedule to join us tonight.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me, Callie and Toshi.
Yeah,
You're more than
brilliant.
welcome.
Yeah, it's a real honor. Like I say, I interviewed Toshi a few. Well, we met randomly actually. A friend of ours doing a law talk, the good, the Goodism they're called now. Um, but Toshi's also, like I say, great to have you back as well. And to set the scene for those that don't have any idea what the trial is about that we're going to get into now. Again, please do go and watch our previous episode for the full download. Toshi, could you give us a bit of a concise overview of this kind of potential financial history in the making? Now, we know this is more than just a legal battle over copyright claims, and that this could potentially redefine the legacy of our financial institutions and Bitcoin itself. And then we could perhaps, head back to Dolores as Dolores has been physically in attendance at the trial for what her thoughts and observations have been so far. So, Toshi, over to you.
Yeah, great stuff. So I'll try and whiz through this introduction as quick as possible. Funnily enough, I actually gave a speech in Parliament the Monday before last, and I requested 3 minutes to speak. I got to, and I was just like, right, deal, let's just take it. So I literally whizzed through everything. I was speaking in front of Christine Anderson and Meryl Naz and Andrew Bridgen, and yeah, well, there were quite a few others there, obviously. And I thought, and it was interesting hearing them speak because they were all raising the alarm about the problem. None of them had a solution. None of them. I mean, they all know what's wrong, and they're pointing out what's wrong, and they're pointing out why it's against the law and why it's unlawful, and but there is no real solution. And the issue is that nobody understands money. And what this lot have done is basically it's really old school mafia style monopolization is what they've done. What they've done is they've simply taken over the distribution channels, and not just logistical distribution in terms of supply chain. They've also taken over the communications channels, with media and telecommunications and all that, but also the channel that is the medium of exchange. And it's the medium of exchange channel that underpins absolutely everything. As Henry Kissinger said, who controls money controls the world. And so what they've had to do in order to control the finance is turn it into an economically worthless security offering, so that they then have literally an unlimited amount of economic power, unless an alternative comes along. And as I've been trying to say to people, we either have a common money used by the people to then create government that works for the people, or government will create currency to control the people. That is literally the only options that we have available to us. Now, if you want to create a money has to be a commodity. And when a commodity monopolizes the market due to its ability to be used as a medium of exchange, it becomes a monopoly commodity. And that's where the word money comes from, a monopoly commodity. So what you have to do is you have to commoditize something. And what you need to do is to commoditize the most useful resource, which will eventually become a money. And by far the most useful resource in the world right now is the internet. It is digital data. So because everything is digital these days, even the platform that we're talking on now is digital. So if you can find a way to commoditize digital data, it will by far become the most valuable commodity on earth, and people will be using that as a medium of exchange to exchange goods and services. And the reason you need a commodity as a money is because if there's just two people, you can use barter, you can swap like for like. However, when a third party comes into trade and an economy is created, you therefore need a common medium of exchange, i.e., something that has the same amount of value to you, to me, as it does to the third person, in the trade. So then the question is, okay, well, how on earth do you commoditize something? So a commodity is, first of all, something that's common, which means there's no human barrier to entry. So therefore, it's either extracted or grown, that's then been itemized and then uniquely identified. So in other words, you have to barrel oil, bottle water, bag coffee, and then you uniquely, something that's common that's then been itemized and then uniquely identified. Now, the issue with a digital network is that if you can produce a digital token, a non-fungible token, so the one that is actually unique, so it's itemized, that has to come from a network. And that network itself will have to have gone through the process of commoditization. And so for a network to go through a period of commoditization, it is required to go through a period of neutral organic growth without any central point of influence, hence why the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto was used. But there also has to be common accountability within the network, and all chains of signatures lead back to the Genesis block, which is why we know the person behind the pseudonym, the man behind the moniker, was always going to reveal himself at some stage in the future, because the Genesis block is where accountability ultimately lies. So then the question has to be, well, when would he come out and reveal himself? Well, it would be after the network had gone through this period of neutral organic growth. And we now know that the Tulip Trust that contained the Satoshi coins that only Satoshi Nakamoto could have mined were scheduled to be returned to Dr. Craig Wright on the 1st of January 2020. And the powers that be recognized this, because they're already way ahead of everyone else, and they were just like, crikey, like, we've got until 2020 to corrupt this network, to distract people away from it, to spin the narrative. And just as a really uncanny coincidence, the Bitcoin white paper was released on the 31st of October 2008, and the SPARS pandemic was first published and released by Johns Hopkins University on the 31st of October, which is the anniversary of the white paper, but they released theirs on the 31st of October 2017. And the whole point of the SPARS pandemic was to introduce a totalitarian one world government that could ban Bitcoin, because that's pretty much the only way you can actually physically stop it, is by somehow creating a global jurisdiction where you can shut down all the mining operations. Now, luckily, they haven't been able to do that just yet. I suspect they thought they'd probably have it done by now, but luckily they haven't. And the Tulip Trust that was scheduled to be returned to Craig on the 1st of January 2020 was actually going to be used as Bitcoin's insurance policy, where Craig was going to single-handedly flip the market, flip the value of the market back out of any alternative shitcoin protocols that the cabal had created, like BTC, and just simply move the value back into his original protocol, which was the genuine Bitcoin, and that would be game over. But it was me that pointed out to him. I said, look, if you want to know what's going to happen when you do this, all you've got to do is look back at history, because history is going to repeat itself. I said, look at what the church has become since they crucified Jesus. It's become a cesspit of crime and corruption. And look at what happened to Gandhi when he drove the colonial British out of his mother country of India. India descended into civil war between the Hindus and the Muslims, and he ended up being murdered by one of his own countrymen who blamed him for all the turmoil that had been created. So I said, if you do this, the powers that be will spin the narrative. they'll say that, you can't trust the technology. It was completely centralized. The entire market flipped on what one man did or said. And all these criminals that have got billions tied up in BTC, are literally going to take you out. Your legacy is going to be in tatters. Please change your mind. And so luckily, he did. And so now we're here in court, which Dolores has been attending. So that's your cue. There we go.
Wow, well done, Toshi. And listen, I watch all your videos, which I know you make nearly every day, and it's a real honor to be here. And I've been at the case last week for a couple of days, and then every day this week. So it's a very significant case, and I think in decades to come, and in hundreds of years, this will be a precedent, whatever happens in this case.
Well, yeah, what's interesting is that Craig has had to pay a £1.2 million deposit in case he loses the case, to pay for the BTC core developers' court costs, because they didn't want to be involved in this. So the court literally said, if you want to sue them, you have got to pay £1.2 million for the privilege. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But he's paid it, and he asked them, would you accept £1.2 million in BTC? And of course, they had to say yeah. And so what he's done is he's moved 26.9, which equates to like 1.2 million pounds worth of BTC into Satoshi's initial wallet. So even if he loses the case, he's then going to prove to them what they've always been asking for: prove that you've got the keys to Satoshi's wallet. So he'll have to pay them using the deposit that's using the private keys that only Satoshi Nakamoto has got. So either way, it's going to be fun and games.
So that was a master move on his part. So I know, listened to one of your videos before Christmas last year. He did that, and I thought that is a master chess move. So that is really impressive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was. It's brilliant, but I mean, I'm sure that there are going to be some truth bombs dropped in this court case. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to his evidence every day, and he was asked hundreds of questions every day, and I think I actually was listening to CoinGeek. Kurt had a very good description of, I think, the third day of the trial, the second day that Craig was asked questions, and Kurt gave a very good description of how relaxed Craig was, and how he just was very comfortable answering very detailed questions on topics related to the electricity supply, or the emails that he sent, or the complicated questions around the coding and what scripts he used. And I think what's kind of very interesting is that no one is acknowledging the breadth and depth and detail of all of the answers, and where he lived at the various times, and all the meetings he had with tens or hundreds of people in detail. And he was, with no notes or anything on front of him, was able to give very detailed and comprehensive answers to every question. So I think it was very impressive, and I was very honored to actually be there to see his body language and how relaxed he was. And as Kurt on CoinGeek said from last week, about how nervous, in a way, the prosecuting legal team are, how nervous they are, and how many times they just kept repeating the same questions over and over again. And Craig was very calm, giving, very detailed answers. So he was very calm and relaxed through it all, I would say.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I was saying to Toshi last week, I'm baby crypto. I'm a crypto baby, so I've been aware of it, and obviously, of course, we know what's coming with this, central digital banking currency and what they want to do. Like Toshi says, how they're going to use that to enslave us further into our 15-minute cities, and you shall eat the bugs, and you shall own nothing, and you shall be happy. I mean, we don't own anything anyway, actually, but without getting into that, and trust law and one thing and another. But I find it super interesting. And I was, again, go watch the interview that we did with Toshi a couple of weeks ago, and I did put quite a bit into XRP and varying things, of which Toshi calls shitcoins. Illuminati shitcoins. Again, that might be controversial for a few people that are watching.
Because they are.
I know it just proper made me laugh. That's why I put it into the introduction. Bitcoin or shitcoin. But again, it just when I met Toshi, in person, shouldn't say person, but in real life, I was just kind of blown away, and I was like, wow. And fortunately for me, I actually oddly in randomly for somebody who's not kind of doesn't know a lot about this kind of stuff did have two Bitcoin BSV coins because somebody told me years ago when I was doing my mad tours, like I was saying to you when we were off camera, Dolores, up and down the country, just shouting about, no, law is not legal. This is how banking works. Come on, everybody. Wakey, wakey. You don't have to wear a mask, etc. I always said a mandate. What's a mandate? Two men going out for a curry together. Come on, let's all get a grip. But yeah, I was super pumped that I'd got these two BSV coins, and obviously I've bought a few more. And I suppose for people that who are listening, Toshi, that kind of don't understand, and like I said, go watch the other video because we do go into this in detail. I think people are missing the real importance of this case, aren't they, in trial? And of course, we know what the mainstream media is about, as they're kind of flowering about, King Charles and his always distraction, always don't look here, look there, isn't it? I mean, we know that the courts are kind of corrupt, aren't we? We know that. Like, so Dolores, like in your opinion, obviously, you've been a big champion of living men and women, to
No.
remove themselves from that indenture of the legal fiction. And many people who are watching this, of course, are well abreast with that. What do you make of it in the courtroom, like in relation to that? Because obviously, like I say, we know the courts are corrupt. Surely, like, if this cabal or are hell bent on stopping this, what's the vibe there? Because you're there in real time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I suppose my interest in being here is exactly my encapsulated law versus legal. So, and of course, I was very honored to be with the Guardians 300, and we trained 90 trainers with mixed up. And then we were taught about 120,000 people one-day courses in 2020, 2021. So, but
Yeah.
why I'm very interested is around jurisdiction. So for the law applies to men and women who are alive in the lawful jurisdiction, and the legal jurisdiction is for corporations or businesses. So one of the reasons why I'm here is that I think, there is accusations of fraud and forgery, and in the law, fraud unravels all. And then
Yeah.
I was very interested to really analyze, and we'll see when the verdict at the end of the trial is what is the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And is it in the City of London? And the City of London as well has, it's called sui generis. It has a special kind of privilege in relation to property and intellectual property. So if it is, and of course, there's a lot of bowing going on, which may be the legal system or ecclesiastical, which is like 80%. And if this relates to the legal entity or the legal fiction, then there will be a precedence. But it could be, of course, as well, very interesting for the impact of the case in relation to intellectual property and in relation to the lawful standing of fraud unravels all in, we'll say, the law, or in, the law in English or in the English court system, if there is an appeal. And there has been very interesting precedents, including, Lord Denning said in 1956, repeated the lawful, that law or fraud unravels all. And then very recently in 2017 and 2019, there has been precedents cases, including in the Supreme Court in England, in relation to fraud. So I think, so the general atmosphere in the room is that there is maybe a total, there was last week of about 40, 50 people, and maybe 60 people in total, and about 15 of those were people viewing it, and then about 5 or 10 journalists, and then 40 or so people involved in the either side of the prosecution, which was interesting. And, the man dressed up as a judge is wearing, a red, which looks to be like what you would if you were a priest as such, with the black robes, which is very interesting. And then there's a lot of bowing going on at the beginning and the end or whatever. So that's And the general atmosphere, what I find very strange is that there, last week, we'll say, the people in the various teams were made statements saying that Craig, I don't really want to repeat them, but just making definitive statements as if it was a given in relation to fraud, making statements, whereas what I would see is that in the law, every man and woman is innocent until proven guilty, and that the team defending him didn't actually make any objections to those statements being made many, many times within the proceedings. So, yeah, it's respectful, in general, but there isn't hardly any cross-examination as well of or defense of Craig when, after like 7 or 8 hours of answering hundreds of questions by the prosecuting team, Craig's team many days said nothing. And they did ask some good questions today in relation to Rob Jenkins in Australia, which was very interesting, and we can go into that later maybe about the white paper. But yeah, so it's generally was just hundreds of questions been asked to Craig over 5 days or whatever, and he remained very calm and answered every question without any notes, and was able to go into huge detail about every little email and every program that he did, and was very impressive, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's it, isn't it? We know that kind of the Saturnian robes of the judge, Saturn, Satan, set the is the theatre, isn't it? And my obsession, people will know if they watch my channel with inner standing these archons or these higher authorities, and they're always giving that nod to Saturn. I'm ruled by Saturn because I'm ruled by Capricorn, so that's the law. Saturn is the law, so they're always kind of having that nod with the black robes of or going into that priesthood or that ecclesiastical where they become that high priest of Baal. So it's super interesting. But again, talk back to you, Toshi, because you're the expert on this. And can you explain to people, if Craig Wright actually, wins this case, like how huge and how impactful that is? I don't think people can kind of begin to kind of understand if they haven't kind of got the backdrop and the knowledge to that. Can you kind of like tell us a little bit more about how big that would be, what that would actually mean for us all?
Yeah. I'll tell you that quickly. So, I'll tell you what this lot have done, literally, very quickly, sort of running through it. So, what we're dealing with is an extremist religious ideology, eugenics, basically, where there are a group of people who claim to be God's chosen people that think everybody else who isn't one of them are genetic abominations, and they want rid of us. So the way you do that is through economics, because literally all legal and political influence stem from economic power. It's all about economics. So the first thing they've done is they've gone for literally control of the financial system. And the way they did that is they first created a central bank so they could print an infinite amount of currency. They then wanted to profiteer from that in order to have economic power. And the way you create a killing in terms of profit, pardon the pun, is to own companies that produce products that have the highest profit margins that are consumable. And so the most expensive consumable products are weapons, which is why the central bank was created in 1913. Then World War I conveniently started in 1914. That went right the way through to 1918. Then they were purposely stimulating the economy again because the central bank makes profits when it prints currency. And then the retail banks that have got shares in the central bank also profit when the central bank profits, and the central bank profits by printing currency. So they're always looking for an excuse to print currency, and nobody complains about the inflation because everybody is on the take. So they continued printing money during the roaring 20s to manufacture the stock market bubble. Rug pulled in 1929, and then they spent the entire 10 years of the Great Depression just purposely using all the profits that they'd made during World War I, buying up all the economically distressed corporations in America. So that's how they got America, bearing in mind they already had London in 1815 when they sent a messenger back to London to let them know incorrectly that Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo. So all the large corporations in London were selling their shares, thinking all was lost. Then the message got back that Wellington had actually won, but by then the Rothschilds already had everything. So that's why London became the financial center of the world, because that was the first one that they got. So they got America during the Great Depression. Then, because they shrank the amount of currency in circulation in the United States in 1929, they needed somewhere to keep printing money, to keep printing currency to. So they pumped it into Europe. So 1930 created the Bank of International Settlements. 1933 started funding Hitler, got Hitler to instigate a war in Europe to drain the European countries of the gold reserves, to then say, oh, look at that. You now no longer have enough gold in your banks to back the amount of currency you have in circulation because we've got it all. So your currency is now going to have to be backed by our currency, and it's our currency that's going to be backed by gold because we've got it all. And then once they'd achieved their objective, because that was the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, the war very conveniently finished the following year in 1945. And just to regress back on that quickly, the Rothschilds got an acknowledgement from the UK Parliament in 1917 that they were going to encourage and back their Zionist ideology of wanting a state of Israel. And that was in 1917, which is why I suspect the war finished in 1918. But then obviously you got the Spanish flu from 1918 to 1920, and here we are in the present day. So after the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed, it was then the Nixon shock on the 15th of August 1971, which was precisely 100 years since Albert Pike released his letter to Mazzini, which was on the 15th of August 1871, describing how 3 world wars would lead to a totalitarian one world government and new world order. And so what they've done is, in order to make sure that only they can benefit from the printing of currency, they had to make currency economically worthless to basically economically enslave us. Because the value of currency goes down the more they print, unless you can increase your prices in line with inflation or somehow reduce your overheads, you're constantly fighting an uphill battle to stay profitable and in business, which means eventually you will either go bust, and particularly if the only place you can get currency from is from a bank, the bank will take over your business, or a larger corporation will take over your business to take advantage of economies of scale, meaning we have no choice. And if we have no choice, we have no freedom. So that's why they want us to carry on using this fiat currency, because that's where it leads to. It leads to centralization. If we are using a medium of exchange that is infinitely divisible instead of infinitely inflated, it means that it's constantly increasing in value. I mean, the rate of increase starts to diminish once it's taken 50% of its market share, but it means that small businesses can then survive and thrive. In fact, everybody can survive and thrive because the medium of exchange we're using is going up in value. That's it. And especially now, if the medium of exchange is digital and therefore comes from a commoditized digital network, we can now use that network for all of our digital needs, where the information on it cannot be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, deleted, or censored. So we can now use it for emails, news posts, music, videos, podcasts, phone calls, you name it, storing our medical records. So literally, we now have a common digital network for all of our digital needs, which means they can't enslave us in this. Hopefully, they won't be able to enslave us in this totalitarian digital dystopia which they're creating. That is all on these centralized servers, that are absolutely humongous. So literally, what we want is for them to start using the Bitcoin network for everything, so that it brings everybody back onto a common level playing field, where we all start using it, and therefore they can't data scrape their huge data servers to get all the data points on us, track us everywhere we go, and eventually enslave us, which is what they're using it for. So really, when you're asking like how big could this be, the stakes could not be higher. This is literally the end game. This is their final coup de grace. And it is all hanging on this court case that Dolores is being sitting in on. It is massive. I cannot stress that enough. So I hope that explained it.
Absolutely. And I have nothing else to say to that. That was awesome, Toshi, and explained it, really well. And again, this idea of this state of Israel, we know that it's a banking fiction, it's a Rothschild invention. The landmass that is Israel, or the geographical landmass, is an actual thing. The state of Israel, state means a condition, and a condition is what we put into contracts. They're trying to contract with us and turn it into this military arm. That's what the state of Israel is. True Israel, the children of Israel, and the return of the children of Israel is us. It's our bodies, and it's the land that was taken from us, which is why they decapitate us on passports, as I've said, because they've taken away. We need to take back the land that was stolen, and remember who we are. And again, that's how huge it is. As I always say, like, know thyself, and understand banking. If we can kind of break it down to those two things, and it becomes kind of weirdly simple. It's always paradoxical. It is a little complex, but it's kind of weirdly pretty simple as well. We know that there's no form of lawful governance, and we know that he who creates owns. So we create government, not the other way around. Government, as we know, means mind control, gouvernare, to control men's the mind. And citizens, we don't want to be those, because that's the municipal servants. We don't want to be a corporate entity or a person. Black's Law, see corporation, see person. And like we touched on earlier, and obviously Dolores is a huge advocate for this and has spoken about this, very loudly from the beginning, has always been one of my heroes. We know that the birth certificate makes us this legal fiction on paper, but we aren't that piece of paper, and we've been brainwashed into thinking that we're this fake name on this piece of paper. There was a US Supreme Court case, and I wanted to touch on this and see what your thoughts were. Obviously, I mean, go read Dolores's CV on her website. It's immense. And they tried to patent a human, but the judge said you can't patent a human. Then I can't remember the name of the case, but they're naturally occurring to the earth. But if you change the genome of a human significantly, maybe if I've got the right thing, if I'm saying genome correctly, you can create what's called a transhuman. And that can then, you're not just owned as chattel on a piece of paper that you can screw up and chuck in the face. Then they're saying that you can be owned, by these corporate entities. What are your thoughts, Dolores, on transhumanism? I mean, we know, like Toshi says, with this is how important this case is, which is why you've been physically down there, which is awesome. We know what their end game is, and that's again, that's why this trial is so important. And this inversion that they're coming at us with, turning boys into girls and girls into boys, and asking 5-year-olds if they want sex changes. As I always say, not on my fucking watch. But this confusion, this collective confusion, and if we can kind of get that cohesion back and kind of start working together as a collective, like say, know thyself, and hopefully remove ourselves from the control mechanisms, and in like Toshi said, this one's huge. Where do you've been at this game a long time, as I say. Where do you see where we're at the moment? Where do you see that we're going, as you've been on the ground?
Yeah, I've been studying this for a long time, and so I think the case you mean is the Myriad Genetics case. It's a Supreme Court case in America in 2012. So of course that's one of the areas where, because in the law you cannot patent anything that is innately biological or is living, and that was a precedence, because in the Human Genome Project they were for 10-15 years before that case. There was a huge amount of effort in just sequencing the genome, which I was involved in sequencing, and I was peripherally involved in the Human Genome Project, but not in those kind of initiatives. And then in 2012 they came and said anything that is biological or is natural cannot be patented, which is a precedence in 2012. So it turns out as well, this whole transhumanism agenda is just part of the narrative, but they can't actually do that. But they're just, having their key puppets repeat that, and then the media repeat it, and then they try to instill fear by saying that, if you do something, that they will control your body or whatever, which is totally unlawful. But maybe just to go back to, when you said, I think you were right when you said, and what Toshi says is, it is very simple. So what Toshi is saying is, and about fiat money and banking, it's in their world, if they keep printing lots of money, it means the purchasing power, or what you can buy from a certain amount of money, is less. So just to explain it maybe simply is that if you were getting a coffee and a sandwich, it might have been £5 in 2020. But if you were to buy the same coffee and a sandwich now in 2024, it could be £10. So what that is just the purchasing power of the amount of money that you earn every week is less and less. Or the same thing if people say, well, you could have bought a home in 1970 for £3,000 and the same home now is £500,000, we'll say, that just shows that the purchasing power. So it's quite simple. So when you said it's very simple. So what they've been doing since 2020, I mean, for many years, but particularly since 2020, is just making fiat money, which is just typing zeros on a computer, and that eventually reaches through to society and historically always leads to periods of hyperinflation, which is like the black and white photographs in Germany where somebody, they needed a wheelbarrow to buy a loaf of bread. And that, in a way, is planned hyperinflation and planned chaos. So, some of their mottos is order out of chaos, right? Or you will own nothing and be happy. And that's why this case is so significant, because this case is about property and property ownership, including intellectual property. But I would see also it's the right to Craig, to his good name and his reputation, and then allegations of fraud and forgery. So what the beauty of the original Bitcoin, or BSV, is that he originally made it to 21 million coins, not things that can be made out of thin air like they do with Tether and the crypto coins, or shitcoins, as Toshi says. But there's just 21 million, and they can be, with the Satoshi, I think it's 10 to the 8 or 100 million, but they can actually be even more subdivisions of Satoshi. So that means that if people have access to 1 BSV or 0.1 or 0.01, that in 100 years' time, that the purchasing power will be more for each Satoshi or for each Bitcoin, because it is limited in supply. And what I really admire is that Craig set up the original, exactly as Toshi has explained, that he published the documents, made it freely available at the end of October 2008, but he gave the lawful notice period of 2 months and 4 days grace in order for anyone else in the world to have the full information. He gave it away for free in order to compete with him, and he kept his identity secret. There was 21 million original Bitcoins. It's limited in supply, and therefore it meets the definition of a commodity and money, as Toshi says. But because it's limited in supply, it cannot be hyperinflated the same way fiat money is. And then the other aspect of it is that they want to try and control us by coercing us to access the assets that we own in the current banking system. So we saw that in countries like Austria and in New South Wales in Australia, that they said you cannot get access to your bank account unless you have to go into the bank, unless you've had a vaccine, or you can't get access to buy food unless you do something else. And that we see this as detailed in Agenda 21 as well, that they want to control us, and they want to do that through our purchasing power, particularly for food. And because their motto is you will own nothing, if you look into the banking regulations, they've changed the regulations between Basel III and Basel IV, that they can actually change the terms and conditions of your bank account within 24 hours, which can start from a Friday evening, literally. So they can just change the limits or the access conditions, or just freeze people's money. So the beauty of this case is that it's based on allegations of fraud and forgery. But what Craig has wanted for 15 years is that he would get an opportunity to present the evidence and to be challenged in court, and that by that process that he would make the evidence available now, and it's in the public domain, and the proceedings are being recorded, and essentially the world can hear his answers. But what's also very interesting is in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, irrespective of what the outcome of the decision is, that the information will be in the public domain. And maybe lastly is that, say if he does not win, then that case can be appealed. But I think there's another element, is that all of us who have BSV and or BTC, we actually have a stake in the outcome. And essentially whatever is decided can affect our property and our assets. So I would say that we also, as a group of millions of people in the world that are also affected by the intellectual property and the decisions that happen in this case, that we could have an opportunity to audit the case, or to come together as millions of people with an interest in Bitcoin and blockchain technology for the outcome of the case in the years to come.
Yeah, brilliant summary. And,
yeah, that's a great point. I'll just to add there quickly. Yeah, it was a really good point that Dolores made there about inflation. Just to sort of try and paint the picture to make it even more clearer about what inflation does. If you go back sort of like the 1500s, when Francisco Pizarro, took part in the Battle of Cacamara, which wiped out all the Incas. That was kind of like when they found El Dorado. They mined an unbelievable amount of gold and silver, mainly silver, and the Incas used labor as their medium of exchange, and so they didn't really understand why the Europeans had this appetite for precious metals and particularly silver. And again, Francisco Pizarro and his army thought they were, doing absolutely great, because suddenly they were rich beyond the dreams of avarice with all this gold and silver that they'd mined. But what they did is they just simply brought an excessive amount of gold and silver back to Spain. And so now all you've got is more gold and silver, an excessive amount of gold and silver, chasing the same amount of goods and services in the economy. That's it. So all that happened is that the costs of goods and services in the economy just simply rose because the amount of precious metal, the supply flooded the market. So they came back thinking they were unbelievably rich, and within a few years there was an absolutely catastrophic economic collapse. And that's what's the beauty of Bitcoin, is because it is fixed in supply. You have to extract it from the network, and it's the most useful commodity on earth because it provides us with data sovereignty, data security, and it's an extension of our own personal freedoms and liberties. So I hope that makes it clear as well.
No, it does. It does. And maybe I should just say as well that I have an interest in this, and because there is a huge application for blockchain technology around so we have these 5 inalienable rights: the right to life, travel, speech, privacy, and property. But the 2 main rights here are your inalienable right in law to privacy, and your inalienable right to property, including all aspects of your intellectual property. But because when I was exposed to the white paper very early on, I immediately saw that for health data, that I was pushing against the GDPR, the European Union General Data Protection Regulation, because I knew they would use it, which was very clear that if you went into hospital, then if somebody sadly passed away or was unconscious, their immediate family could say, well, they could not be given access to their health data, so they wouldn't actually know what the cause of death was in a very easy way. So from 2011, I've actually been lecturing in business schools and in medical schools and science around the application of blockchain technology, that each of us can have our private health information associated with ourselves, but also we can give access to that information to our loved ones, and also put up on the blockchain a one-page our wishes in the event of being unconscious, or in the event of that we die, that our loved ones can immediately get our body, we can have our own autopsy, or that if we're unconscious, what are our wishes in the hospital, and also that if we have our health data over our lifetimes, that we can own it ourselves, and that our loved ones can get access to the health data. So this case, you know, is fundamental in relation to the lawful ownership and recognizing the rights around property and intellectual property and the ownership of data, including medical information and health data. So, and of course, it has huge implications around the banking system. And of course, that you can transfer money within seconds in the original BSV, or transfer BSV, but also that you can make micropayments. Now, one of the reasons, you know, the people that are challenging Craig are those that make money from data, like like Facebook and YouTube and Google. And what people, agree to is that they agree to give their data to them, and then they sell it on to advertisers and make a huge amount of money. And the same with banking, that relatively it costs maybe 3%. So £3 in £100 if you're going to do a financial transaction with your credit card. But if the BSV gets established widely, people will own their own data, and it will be a fraction of a cent in order to transfer money around the world instantaneously. And that would be a fundamental risk to the markets of the banking system, the current banking system. And the biggest companies in the world are around data, where people give them their health data, like Google and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and X or whatever. So this technology is groundbreaking. It's entirely disruptive. And it means that the biggest businesses in the market, the banking system, and the people who make money from your data will be challenged fundamentally. And this would be, if you were to do a landscape analysis, would be a huge risk to them. So that's why this is, on many, many levels, this case is fundamental and groundbreaking. And if Craig loses, it will also be very interesting for if an appeal will happen, and then an analysis of what jurisdiction, and was there sufficient evidence that we can actually audit the case. And there has been precedence cases of appeals based on fraudulent cases in the world recently, including in Australia and in England.
Yeah, awesome. Brilliant. And I think that's it again, isn't it? Data is our property. It's our intellectual property, and acts like the Data Protection Act were given to us, so to speak. A breach of data protection is a breach at law. It's not legal. It's a breach of it is a breach of law, and a breach of trust law. And a breach of trust law is one of the highest breaches of law. So it's such a powerful tool. And data is, I don't think saying data is a new commodity is probably even correct, but it's such a powerful thing, and we give it away, don't we, in the system. Whereas, like you say, if this case wins, or even if it goes to appeal and it wins, it's going to reveal that old system. And like Toshi says, everything's got a signature, hasn't it, on the Bitcoin, on the BSV network. It's trackable, so they can't get away with what they've been getting away with over here, and they can't enslave us, etc. and so on. That's, like I say, that's how important it is. I mean, Dolores, you've been part of so many projects and activism since the pandemic, and no doubt way before then. And we spoke off camera, didn't we? Like, about, one of your famous phrases is, we're giving up our unalienable rights for the insidious benefits and privileges of the state. And you've been amazing at creating this awareness of the legal fiction and empowering people to see that, and that we are the beneficiaries of this land. The law, what many people don't realize, is the land, the air and the water, of which we have dominion, and it's our inheritance that, in our ignorance, we've kind of gifted over to them, and it's all tricks and deception and deceit and trickery and sleight of hand and mirrors and smoke and etc. and so on. But it's like what I always say, people tend to think that evil is something that's going on out there that we need to battle, but it's more that, we've allowed it to happen in our ignorance, and they've kept us ignorant, of course, and brainwashed and programmed and the rest.
Yeah.
I was interested to see on your website, Dolores, that Cahill, your surname means great warrior, or one who's strong in battle.
Yeah. Now,
And I can
know
certainly
that.
see that, I resonate with that.
No, I didn't know that until a few years ago. I thought it was the son of Cahill. That's what I thought. But actually, someone did an analysis of it, so I'm really honored that it means warrior and strong in battle. But
That's really cool.
Yeah, that one of the things is that what I've been honored to do is that the law is actually simple. That the whole law is just act in honor, do no harm. And it applies to men and women who are alive, and it is in the lawful language of the nation. So that would be Spanish in Spain, or Irish and English, in Ireland. And then, so it's act in honor, do no harm. And that each of us has these inalienable rights, like in the court case. So it's the right to life, travel, speech, privacy, and property. And that the law is simple. But one of the things I think that's really profound is that the people that are paid, and of course our rights are exercised in the lawful process, which is in a lawful trial by jury system, which is a jury of 12 men and women acting in the law in their native language, and they're actually liable for and accountable for their role in trial by jury. But in October 2023, it was a great honor that in Oxford, we had spent a year preparing for it. We did an educational trial by jury event in Oxford in England around the 15-minute cities. And one of the ladies that was an example in that educational event was a lovely Muslim young taxi driver. And she had obviously got her travel restricted because of the 15-minute cities. And then a week later, we went on to the Sami people in Norway, and I was a lawful observer at a Sami educational event there around with trial by jury, and that was in relation to radiation and 5G. Now, what was beautiful is in my network, we brought about people came from 20 countries to Oxford, and about people from 15 countries went with us to the trial by jury event in Norway. And I went to 8 different countries just in October, November, December, around starting up a proper lawful jury service and education event around the law, because the importance is that, and these are maxims of law, that no one is above the law, and that ignorance of the law is no excuse because it's so simple. And then what's very fundamental in this case is that fraud unravels all, and that all men and women, no matter where they are accountable for their actions and omissions. And I think the fraud unravels all, though, is actually very crucial in this case, because there are accusations of fraud going left, right, and center. But the thing is, there are issues that if there is sufficient evidence that there was no fraud, then everybody will have to be audited for were their actions and omissions coherent with the evidence, all the way through this case. Which I think will be fundamental and very interesting. So that's my thing, I guess, is that I also lectured in the law, because people mightn't be aware that when you do scientific research or clinical trials involving men and women, I was the principal investigator in many of those. And why I had to study the law is that if anything happened to the men and women involved in the scientific research or in the clinical trials, that I would be liable, because your right to life includes your right to bodily integrity, you know, that nothing harmful can be done to your body, which includes informed consent. And that is in the law. So that's why I suppose people might think, you know, why wouldn't I, as a professor in the School of Medicine for 20 years, be so informed or have studied the history of the law for all my life? And that is because when you do something, you know, in research, or you give a development of a diagnostic or a prevention, that this, if somebody dies on the trial, I could be up on front of a lawful trial by jury for causing harm or contributory harm, or if somebody died on the trial for, and because I always took that very seriously, I really studied the law and its effect on people's inalienable rights. And then the other thing is, if anybody infringes on them, because no one is above the law, they are accountable as well, right? So it's, you know, so that's why the verdict in this case, the language and the jurisdiction is quite fundamental, because there's accusations of everybody in there accusing people of fraud, and the evidence, we have to see if it's consistent. So it's an amazing case. And partly as well why I'm here is that in case, you know, there's any issue, if documents disappear in 5 or 10 years time, you know, that you never know what would happen, that there's now a group of us and we go for lunch together, that many people have heard exactly what happens at first-hand experience, which is very, you know, we've heard it all, we've seen what went on.
Yeah, lawful observing, isn't it? You know, awesome work, awesome work. And I think that's it. We've been brainwashed into forgetting just how powerful we are. Like I say, it's a universal maxim, isn't it? He who creates own. Hang on a minute, government, we created you. I think something's gone wrong here, and it's certainly misfeasance and at this point malfeasance in office, and they are committing crimes of which they can be, you know, they can be jailed for. You know, forget administrative courts, but you know, the true courts of law. There's 8 million acts and statutes in legal, you know, dance, monkey do, you know, monkey do a poo on you, you know, that's the jurisdiction. And like you said, it's quite important to try and get a basic understanding of jurisdictions over to people. And juris means law and diction means words. It's just law words. Why a judge passes a sentence, because it's all words and it's all the language. And if we can dissect that and understand it, but also, yeah, doing amazing stuff like that and being on the ground. And again, you know, a trial by a jury of your peers, you know, you're not going to get that in a bullshit administrative court. And the private place is a business. Well, another thing is there's a jury trial, which is obviously the judge kind of makes the decision. There's the trial by jury, but there's also jury nullification, where you know, a jury can actually nullify any laws that they deem unfair in the name of the people, for the people, by the people. And we've just forgotten how powerful we are, that it's actually, you know, hang on a minute, we're your boss. And they just seem to have forgotten, you know, and it's to turn a judge back into a magistrate and a public servant, really. They're all in the wrong jurisdictions, serving themselves.
Yeah, I think it was very powerful. So that was one of the reasons why you know, what happened in COVID-19 was just them infringing on they were trying to see, I think, how much they would get away with and what percentage of the population were not aware that we have freedom of speech, freedom of travel, and rights to full, free, and informed consent, and that it is a criminal offense to coerce somebody to doing something with their body, or, you know, like what happened in many countries, but including in Ireland, where people were literally, you know, man in his 40s was having a heart attack and they wouldn't treat him unless he took, I think, a PCR test or a vaccine or whatever. So, but that is actually a criminal offense in law, you know. But what's beautiful is that the law is actually quite divine, and, you know, a republic, the real definition of, we'll say, of a republic versus a democracy is really mob rule, but actually the beauty of the law and a republic is that even if, when you say jury nullification, it's so divine that if one, you know, 92-year-old woman or anyone, a man, takes a case and they win, that sets precedence. But what's actually divine and beautiful about it is that because we're all connected, that one man or woman's rights embodies everybody's rights. And that's why you have trial by jury nullification. That say, if my case, they had accused me of a criminal offense to go to prison for 10 years, if that ever goes for organizing a meeting of more than 30 people outside in the summertime in August 2020, and I had paid for the speakers and organized that rally in order to get a precedence, right, which we can do forever. But if a trial by jury assessed that example, that one case, one by me or by somebody like me as a precedence, would defend everybody's rights, that no piece of paper, whether it's for climate change or moneypox or monkeypox or COVID-19 or COVID-25 or whatever, can actually infringe on anybody's inalienable rights. And the men and women dressed up as police or within the courts administering that, they can be then counter-accused for malfeasance in public office, exactly as you said, criminal malfeasance, which in England today is 20 years in prison. And that's reserved particularly for people who are paid and dressed up as police or members of parliament. And the reason for that is that if you are in those roles, you are paid and you are employed under law or working in law. And that if you go into those roles and abuse your position, that's lifetime in prison. So you can't have it, say, that someone decides, well, I will be a police constable. And then the first thing that they do is they resent someone, their first cousin or their neighbor, and they abuse that role in order to have false accusations or to deny someone of their property while they are paid as a constable or a member of parliament or involved in a trial by jury service in law. So that's what this is really a time of revelation, I would say, that we are the first generation that could have figured out the depth of the corruption, because we'll say our parents and grandparents, great-grandparents, they would only have known, one physician, one priest, one judge. They would hardly ever have been into the system, and they would not be able to have the huge depth of knowledge. So I really see that the defending of our rights really has only started since 2020, because many of us have spent our whole lives not really talking about this to anyone, because you might be, saying comments with people, but most people wouldn't know what you were trying to, see if they were aware of what's going on. Whereas now in 2020, in the organizations I've been in, Guardians 300, there's over 100,000, in our network and Freedom of Travel Alliance, we have over 100,000. World Freedom Alliance is in every country in the world. The World Doctors Alliance has 140,000 people. And I've been for the last few years working on cooperatives and integrating with the farming communities worldwide. And we're setting up local co-ops in 8 countries for the last 2 years. And that's really a grassroots movement. And I've introduced about 40 of those co-ops to the original Bitcoin and BSV, in order that in case there is a lockdown on the so-called banking system, that they already are connected with each other, and they are already have the ability to use BSV, including to sell food and to do business. So I have great hope, actually. So it's an amazing time to be alive, and it's a real honor in a way to be here at the court case. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you ever get to sleep, Dolores? That's what I'm thinking. Do you have a nap? I don't think you do. I think you're just too busy. That's amazing.
No, I do.
And I think
I don't
but
take myself very seriously. I actually think it's such an honor. And the people that you meet in this journey are also amazing people. The people that we just met in the last even 2 weeks or so are all very interesting, and people who are critical thinkers and also have been in multiple jobs, in multiple roles. That's what I like, is a lot of us maybe have to switch jobs and have to be quite innovative, and also not take ourselves too seriously, because when you go down this road, you realize much of what you were taught in science and medicine and history and banking is entirely wrong. So most of us have been down so many rabbit holes at this stage. We, somebody tells us something very fundamental, and I just go, well, I'll look into it. I won't. The exact opposite of what I've studied in university or whatever. So I think it's an amazing, amazing time to be alive, and I'm honored. And I
Yeah.
just
No,
every
I
day I'm
agree.
happy. Yeah.
It's like I'm having the best time ever. I mean, being awake over 20 years, quite isolating, really, back then, showing my age. But everyone's like, shut up, Jill, no one wants to hear it, Jill, me firmly with my tinfoil hat on at 18, and everyone's going, right in the head. But you kind of let it go at points. But it's always something I've never give up on, that kind of spiritual quest. What is the question that drives us? And I do generally believe that there is this kind of quantum monkey tip, that they say it only takes 3.5 million of us here to be doing these changes. And we know changes within as well, but that we affect that. It's that it goes out, and like I say, things that are grassroots, things like these things that we're going to get covered, financial, food, all the things that they want to do. The darker they get, the more we shine our light upon it, don't we? And we know that history has been a complete fabrication. Everything that we told was wrong. 1 + 1 never equaled 2, and it's a lot for some people to comprehend. But it's such a beautiful thing, and I've been at this game for a while now. And I do class it as a game, and I don't mean that flippantly, because there's been a lot of suffering, and but what I'm saying is, I think we've got to not take ourselves too seriously. We've got to keep laughing, and it is a real and British means something else, but for ease, it is a real British thing. I think we keep our stiff upper lip, and we keep shining our light on it, and we keep just spreading that awareness. I don't like to say awake, because awake is a
No,
party for the
I
dead,
say
but
aware as well.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I say
think you're dead
yeah,
right. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
and
definitely,
yeah,
definitely,
it's beautiful. And I think we can bring Toshi back in, but I do think
yeah,
it is like I was aware, as it turns out, because of my background, in Tipperary. My father was supporting a precedence case from when I was about 7 years old to when I was 21. And that case, it wasn't us, but it was a neighboring farmer, and he lost, all through my childhood. And many people, including our family, were pressurized to not continue to give evidence and support him. So that was from my whole childhood. So that I've been aware all my life, but even professionally, and many people, you might say one or two things to see if people were aware, but generally nobody ever picked up on it. And I didn't really speak about any of this to my immediate family or my extended family, because
yeah.
there was no point back then, really. They were so, but now it's an amazing time. And I think I've always said we only need about 2 people in a million, and that to actually, so that's only like 144 or whatever between Britain and Ireland, which is beautiful. But to bring Toshi back in, I mean, the amazing value of the blockchain is that because of its encryption methodology, that they cannot censor us the way we've been censored in the last 4 years by just like many of us all through, like I've said, is I will debate anybody, and I have debated. I've been on Zoom calls with 60 people from the law, including retired judges and barristers or whatever, where I gave my analysis of law versus legal. This had been 3 or 4 years ago. And the same when I gave my speeches in Bath, is that I'm happy to be challenged in a public place if what I'm saying is wrong. And that is, that's the way we have to do that. But what they've done in a very duplicitous way is using their technologies is censored many people, including us, but many people who've had adverse events or who were trying to expose what was going on in the hospitals or even in the schools and in the government. So I think also as well that Craig has mentioned during the trial that the capabilities maybe of the blockchain technology is only 1% or so is being revealed. There is much more. But one of the aspects that he, really was, because it actually came up today, this was called Time Coin. And the Rob Jenkins actually today, which was an amazing, what an honorable man and very articulate. And he had known Craig for, maybe the last 30, 35 years. but he said today as well that he was given a copy of a white paper by Craig, or saw a copy of a white paper on the 2nd of December 2008 at a dinner, at a lunch that they had. And there it was referred to as Timecoin. But one of the importances is with the blockchain, if you have things that are happening today, that if the blockchain technology is widely accessible, that can be easily turned into an alternative news system and broadcasting system, and also a time-stamped archive, which they cannot manipulate and they can't censor in real time. So it's kind of, and you know, the blockchain technology in 10 years time, 100 years time, you can then go back to what was happening on the day. So that is quite disruptive when you know the lies that has been, you know, told to us through the education system and the history books or whatever. So there are so many levels where the blockchain technology is disruptive. If you have a narrative of controlling people through agents, you know, of the legal system, where they are not police constables, and then through using people's time by unlawful and excessive taxation, and then, you know, the current banking system controlling who can get access to money for innovation and enterprise building, and then, you know, increase a huge amount of interest so that people really can't get out of the debt slavery that they're in. So this blockchain technology, that's why they've censored it so much. And I would say, as Toshi has said, it probably has contributed to what they've been doing in the last 4 years, because they really do not want this technology to be widely available and widely understood.
No, absolutely. Toshi, are
Yeah,
you still
yeah.
with us?
I am indeed. Yeah, no, I'm listening intently. It's great to hear, because I wasn't at the court case today and I didn't get to see any of it. So I really appreciate people reporting on it. But yeah, just adding quickly to what Dolores was saying there about how you can't patent or copyright anything in nature or anything that's naturally occurring. This is actually why the concept of blockchain cannot be patented, because blockchain is actually naturally reoccurring, because data can only be commoditized one way. And this is what so many people overlook when they talk about the white paper. That people say, oh, you know, Craig invented blockchain. Well, if Craig invented blockchain, then you could say, well, whoever it was that you know, created the number one also invented the number one. Well, that's not the case. The concept of the number one has been around since the beginning of time. And the concept of blockchain technology, which enables the commoditization, has also been around since the creation of digital technology. It's just that Craig was able to express how to do it. So you can't patent or copyright blockchain technology, but what you can do is you can patent and copyright any technologies built on top of blockchain technology. And where Craig has got everybody by the short and curlies is that he has created the literally created a way to make non-fungible tokens. And it's these non-fungible tokens that are cryptocurrencies. They're all NFTs. So even though Craig, you know, expressed blockchain, you can't patent that. You can patent an NFT which immediately wipes out every single shitcoin cryptocurrency on the entire market, because they're all economically worthless security offerings as defined by SEC versus WJ Howico 1946. It's that simple. And so really this court case, I mean, Craig said, yeah, you know, I've got the intellectual properties that I will enforce anyway, because they've already been granted to him. But really, this court case is what gives him legitimacy in the eyes of the public, in front of the world. Somebody saying, yes, you are Satoshi Nakamoto. Bitcoin is BSV, which is the original protocol. It's the only chain of signatures that goes right the way back to the Genesis block. You are entitled to your intellectual property. Therefore, all of these shitcoins that are economically worthless and are nothing more than a distraction away from Bitcoin to rob people of their money and create the largest financial bubble in history can go. So that's what I'd like to add there.
No, it's brilliant. And maybe if I just say there's three things that I thought from the court case that I wasn't aware of as well, just to give some feedback. One was that Craig mentioned that he was spending millions every month in mining, in the first few years, so that he actually was investing maybe 60 million US dollars in the first few years in order to keep the system up and running, which was amazing, and that he was doing that deliberately in order to wait for the other miners to come in and to actually mine Bitcoin around the world. So that was something that was very interesting. Another interesting thing is that he has already submitted over 8,000 patents. He's one of the biggest patent holders in the world. And I think he has over 1,000 patents granted already in this area. And when I actually spent a few days looking at his patents, and many of them are in the area of what would be competing with the central bank digital currency. So I think that is one area that he probably owns the largest collection, which may interfere with the central banks in the world trying to bring in this lockdown on people's bank accounts, that he would be a major someone who could block that. And also, he did a few weeks ago, before the case started in February, offer to reach a compromise that if they actually respected his position and did not really come into his world to try and make these accusations, that he would give everybody who agreed with lawful legislation around the operation and respected his patents, he would give them access to the technology for free. And he actually reiterated that in the court case, that he would, if people respected the aspects of law around data and around the proper conduction of, respecting people's privacy, but also that people would be subject to the law if they were engaged in criminality, that he would only look for his costs in the case and would essentially not claim any damages from the opposing side. Now, that was also rejected in the court. And then what happened today is that his long-term colleague and a world expert in the area of data and cybersecurity from Australia, Rob Jenkins, he was asked by the people, the prosecutors will say, was he given a copy of the white paper? And he had given evidence about 2 years ago in another case, and he had reviewed it. So he said he wasn't given copies of the Bitcoin white paper, but he was shown copies of the Timecoin white paper, and that he said that it looked very like the Bitcoin white paper. And then he was asked around what time was this, and he specifically gave evidence that it was around the financial crash, the GFC in Australia, and that he specifically remembers, and he had reviewed it for the other court case, of this lunch on the 2nd of December 2008, and also that Craig had described the white paper on a napkin and described in great detail. And because of the financial crisis, both of them had more time in that time period around December 2008, and that Craig showed him a copy of the Timecoin white paper and had described it and had discussed all the matters within it. So that was, I think, and Rob Jenkins said that he remembered it specifically, and the lunch, and also the conversations that they had from e-gold and various digital currencies. So I think that was, and the lawyers for the side opposing Craig were very perturbed at that today. And Rob Jenkins was a very credible witness as well, and is an absolute expert and has worked for like BT and Vodafone and from the banking system, and the two of them I'd say are world leaders. So that they're just a few of the points that I thought were amazing from the court case and very important, I would say.
Wow. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to add on top of that as well, when Dolores was talking about what the network can actually be used for, literally what I was going to say before was that blockchain is just simply a way of uploading digital information onto a digital network by linking it with other bits of data, random bits of data that are uploaded by previous users using hash numbers and a chain of digital signatures. So literally, it is just simply a way of uploading, and that's really how you need to look at Bitcoin is a network rather than, again, it's the powers that be changing the narrative, saying, oh, it's a blockchain, and people are just like, oh my God, it's a blockchain. There must be lots of other different blockchains, blah, 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 blah. It is just simply the process that data goes through to get uploaded. Once it's uploaded, it cannot be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted. So literally, it's the internet. So literally, when you, I mean, one of the best things to use these things for would certainly be a news channel, to be a news broadcaster, so that the information that you're giving out can't be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, which obviously increases your level of integrity in news reporting. So yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. That's like a total agreement. Like the three monkeys. Yeah. But yeah, and like obviously we know what the mainstream media are about now. I think everyone's worked that one out now. And interestingly enough, actually, the reason they can lie to the extent that they do, they actually class news reports legally as adverts. So if you're buying into it, it's classed as a commercial. Yeah. So that's how they get away with it on the sideline. But certainly, I mean, this conversation's been absolutely awesome. So unless anyone's got anything else to say, I guess I'm like an excited penfold. That's what I call myself right now. I'm like, wow, that conversation was amazing. Like, and like I said, please go watch my interview with Toshi. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add unless you guys have got anything else to add or.
I just like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And I know you have a background in law as well, right? So fair play to you for doing all this with that background. That's really good. And to say that I admire Toshi very much as well. And we have known each other now for some time. But I listen to all of his videos every day or every second day when he puts them up. And I'm learning, So thank you for having me, Callie. And thank you, Toshi, for being on with me. It's brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, let's upload this chat onto the internet and hope it gets some views.
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add, what a great lady, honestly, absolutely brilliant. And you, Toshi, always blowing my mind. Both of you, absolutely brilliant. And I just love pure hearts doing great stuff. And that's what always comes across with you, Dolores and Toshi. Hopefully, me that we do it for the right reasons, and hopefully we do it for the great good. We all work together and we all keep linking in. Hopefully, I'll give the What the Festival a bit of a plug. I call it What the Fuck, but it's Weekend Truther Festival, and I'll hopefully see Dolores. Dolores is talking there, so I'll be there walking the wall on the 3rd and 4th and 5th of May. So I thought I'd give that a little plug as well. Matt Letizia, some awesome speakers. I'll put Dolores's links below, I'll put Toshi's links below, our Dark Matters Network links below, and links to the festival as well. And thank you everybody for watching, and thanks again so much, guys. You've absolutely nailed it, bang on, blown my mind. And thank you so much for taking the time out and joining me here at Dark Matters.
Bye bye.
Bye everyone. I've been Carly Spell. Good night, and I'll catch you on the flip.